Jeez. Oh, man.
Okay, Ralph, go ahead. You're live.
All right, thank you, Dane. Appreciate it. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. I got 4:07 on June 10th. And let me take roll, as the mayor says, by voice. Wendy Leese. Wendy?
Here.
Okay, Tom Pollock,
Here.
Robert Juneman,
Here.
Al Malone,
Here.
Anna Verska. Anna,
Maybe she's on mute.
I think she's on mute. Yep,
Let me see if I can unmute her.
there you go. Anna, you're here?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Tom Arnold.
Here.
And I am here, and we have Katrina Foley, the mayor is here, John Stevens, we got Carol, Angie, and Jennifer King. Thank you, everybody. I know it's always a challenge. Zooming. Zooming is now a verb, I guess, like. Okay, as some of you noticed, John Henson's name is not on the agenda report. He actually resigned. He did not reapply for the committee back in the March timeframe. And then with COVID turning everything upside down, the appointments got deferred. And so he resigned from the committee. That's why he is not on. I'm sorry to see him go. John, he always had good, well thought out comments that he had.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to bring up came to my attention recently. Within the last, I guess, a week, 10 days, there was a emergency call, paramedic fire, and they responded. And the as I guess the typical process is certainly the paramedics went into the residence, tend to the person, but there's typically a fireman who stays out by the apparatus, and he's available by radio, but he kind of stays out there, watches the equipment and stuff. And apparently a resident who happening by or lived close by started conversing with the fireman, asking about the fire truck, where the fire truck came from, whether it was supplied by the state or purchased by the city. Went on to, now this person, I don't know who it is, but they stated they were a former member of the Pension Oversight Committee, not the Finance Committee, but Pension Oversight. Went on to say that they were a member of the Pension Oversight Committee, that they were concerned about, thought pensions were ruining the city, thought that the unions had too much power, they thought the unions were controlling council members, and went on to just basically very critical of pensions, the pension situation, and apparently that lasted the entire call. I don't know how long they were there at the residence before they wheeled the person out and transported him to the hospital. But again, I don't know who it is, but we all have our opinions about pensions, and some are some think one way and some think another. But please, I mean, when an employee, whether it's a fire person, whether it's a police, whether it's somebody from public services doing some maintenance on the street or whatever, please don't try and challenge them with comments or whether asking about the financial health of the city or talking about pensions. It just, it's not appropriate. I don't think anybody on the committee would do that, but that was just really surprising, and that situation definitely uncalled for. If you got,
Why is it inappropriate? I'm just kind of curious.
not when they're on an emergency call, Tom.
Well, you just said when they were a public employee, you went beyond the on-call.
Yeah, they were working, they were on call. He was doing his job, and this person comes up and interrupts him, starts berating him about pensions. That's not the time and place.
Who was he?
I don't know. Don't know.
When is the time and place where you can give your thoughts in an open forum?
Right, come to council. Right to the, I guess, right to the labor association. But not out on the street in public like that. When they're you know, I'm sure if you were the person who the emergency call was called on, you don't want some neighbor, taking on somebody who's there who'd help you and challenging him on something that's not appropriate at that point in time.
Well, everything you said, I thought was pretty true, to be honest with you. So, I mean, they're not challenging, they're just giving you facts. What facts did the guy give that wasn't true?
No.
Yeah, I understand it's an appropriate time when a guy's saving a life, I guess. But certainly what he said was true.
Well, that's your opinion. That's
Okay.
that's an
It's
opinion.
a fact.
That's not
It's
a
a
fact.
fact, Ralph. It's not an
Well,
opinion.
that's a fact to you, but maybe not the person sitting next to you. I mean, we all have our opinion on pensions. We all have our opinion on the financial health of the city. But what I think is we're finding out today, what is a fact for one person may not be a fact for another person. So I'll leave it at that. But if you haven't, I would say if you have an issue, whatever it is, and a lot of you do, come to City Hall. You come to council. You got your 3 minutes, and go for it. Okay, with that, I guess we have one public comment, Angie,
Yes, there's one I have on audio
or
recording.
public comment, excuse me.
Yep. Are you ready for me to play it?
Sure.
Okay. She talks quickly.
Hello, my name is Mary Simmons, and I am a lifelong resident of Costa Mesa. I am here to voice my concerns about the city's budget. I'd like to see the city council defund the police and see that the money is redirected to social works programs, school funding to help aid against homelessness and environmental programs. We want to see a budget that reflects the city's commitment to making it a nice place to live, where the citizens feel safe because they feel supported and not scared because of a near militarized police force. I want to see the Costa Mesa police force held accountable for violent use of power. And I want to do that to make sure the defense for any lawsuit pressed against the Costa Mesa Police Department comes from police pension funds and not taxpayer dollars. This would hold the police force accountable for their violent crimes against our citizens. Costa Mesa citizens want to see our money being spent on things that will make our community a better place to live. A community that values human life, education, access to proper mental health care, and housing for citizens. To return or forward, press 1.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, she does talk fast. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you, public. Thank you, Angie. Okay, we have new business. And I hope some of you at least got a chance to watch the council meeting last night. I want to thank Carol. I thought she did a very good job presenting the 2021 proposed budget to council. And I guess so. Why don't you go ahead, Carol? I assume it's going to be similar. And also the about an hour ago, half hour ago, I guess the presentation or the charts that Carol presented last night were sent out to committee members. So that may be in your inbox. I just printed it out. There's a lot more there than I thought. Okay, Carol, why don't you go ahead then, if you would, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the screen. What I'll do is I'll start the presentation. I'll try to summarize it a little bit more today. I'm assuming most of you probably had a chance to review it last night. It's also on YouTube for if you want to go back to the actual council meeting presentation. But for our sake, I'm going to go ahead and just start the presentation. All right. Can everybody see the presentation? Just want to make sure. Beautiful.
Yes, can see it here.
So for the overview for the 2021 proposed budget, I'll kind of go through some quick slides on some of the highlights that were included in this year's budget. Also discuss some of the revenue impacts that we're starting to anticipate for the 2021 budget, the expenditures reductions, which will go through specific department reductions and getting to the balanced budget. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up with the general fund reserves and the budget calendar. For our 2021 budget, you may recall, went to council on May 19th with our preliminary estimates. At that point in time, we were anticipating about slightly under a $30 million deficit. Our revenue estimates were about $120.6 million against a expenditure budget of about $150.4. We also received some council approvals to move forward with utilizing our CalPERS prepayment savings, a combination of reserves and department reductions, and replacing our IT fund to 6 months at that moment in time. Since then, as you know, the state has approved Orange County to reopen. That includes in-person dining, destinations, manufacturing. They've recently also approved opening hair salons, and as of, I believe, this week, we'll also be opening casinos, arcades, and fitness centers. For our general fund revenue, as a result of the Orange County reopening, we were able to go back to our sales tax projections and adjust them accordingly. We were originally assuming reopening Orange County would take a little bit longer period of time. As a result, we've increased our sales tax projections by about $4.3 million. We're also anticipating to resume street sweeping and parking fines, bringing back up the revenues to original pre-COVID projections to about $1 million. This resulted in an increase in our general fund revenue estimates from 120.6 to 126. We also took the additional step of rescinding our plan to delay the IT strategic plan funding from 6 months to the full year. Therefore, fully funding the 1.5% of general fund annual contribution to the IT replacement fund.
Thank you.
Balancing our budget. So how did we get to the proposed 2021 general fund budget? We readjusted our sales tax. We're anticipating some government reimbursements of about $500,000. We reinstated our original projections pre-COVID for our street sweeping and other parks related revenues. And we are recommending the use of some of our declared disasters reserve to tune about $7.2 million. On our expense side, our departments came in totaling $10.8 million in reductions, and we're also anticipating a staff furlough, 10% of totaling $6 million in staffing compensation reductions to a total of $133.6 million. As it relates to our current adopted budget, our recurring revenues is reducing to tune about 10%, $14.1 million. You may recall in our 1920 adopted budget, there was a one-time transfer in from the capital fund. We're not recommending that one time to continue. And we are increasing the use of fund balance to about $6.7 million difference from the current year. And our expenses also was reduced to 6%. For our general fund revenues, as you can tell, the largest portion of our revenues is comprised of sales tax and property tax. For our revenues totaling $126.4 million, property tax, thankfully, is not seeing any reductions. In fact, we're anticipating a 2% increase since those assessed values by the county were conducted in January. We may see some reductions in the following year in 21-22. Our transient occupancy tax, we're estimating half of it to be reduced, technically about $4.8 million. We know that leisure travel is not up, business conferences and so forth, they're not resuming anytime soon. And in discussions with Travel Costa Mesa, they are concurring with the half of a reduction of those revenue sources. Our sales tax is up to $55.4 million. It's still taking a reduction year over year. However, in this $55.4 million, we are anticipating a greater impact of Orange County opening up. And like Mayor Pro Tem Stevens said earlier, South Coast Plaza opening up extremely soon. We are also reducing some of our revenues of about $6.9 million, $1 million of which is our investments. In prior years, those investments comprised of the CalPERS prepayment plan. In this year for 2021, we are taking the step of taking that revenue down and assuming that savings in the general fund retirement category, since it is a CalPERS retirement savings. We're also reducing the marijuana tax by about $1 million. The current year's budget anticipated $1.2 million in revenues. However, due to some changes earlier this year, the expected revenue is slightly over $100,000. So that's $1 million of that. Some of our building related permits are also down to a little bit under $1 million, and rentals of fields and senior center rentals and so forth to ensure social distancing and avoiding of large crowds. Our rentals are definitely going to be seeing a reduction with a hope of an uptake in the latter part of the fiscal year. For our 2021 general fund expenses, as you can tell here from the $133.6 million expenditure budget, over 55% of the general fund continues to be dedicated to the public safety departments. As you can tell, the rest of the departments are not as large. City manager, barely 5%, finance, 3%, development services, definitely under 5%. Makes it very difficult to balance a budget without impacting the public safety departments, since they hold such a large piece of the pie. Some other additions into the general fund budget were the year-over-year CalPERS increase of about $2.8 million. That does include the savings of about $700,000 for prepaying CalPERS in July. We're also budgeting election costs. We're continuing the waiver of the CAD ordinance to a $2.2 million capital budget from the general fund. We're, as mentioned earlier, recommending the use of the declared disaster reserves to help balance the budget. We're anticipating at the end of 1920 to maintain about $45.8 million in reserves, assuming that our scenario 2 of 1920 impacts totals about $18.5 million. So balancing our general fund budget. So we started this process the end of March when COVID hit with a preliminary deficit of about $29.8 million. At that moment, we asked departments to present 3 different scenarios to us, a 5%, 10%, and 15%. We also reinstated the IT strategic plan. And then we continued the budget balancing process by using a multifaceted approach to getting there. Our departmental reductions, use of reserves, and staff furloughs. For our citywide departments, city manager's office contingency was reduced by $360,000. The contingency in the policies for the city is about $1 million. In 1920 budget, that was reduced to $500,000. This would take it down by an additional $360,000, leaving slightly over $100,000 for any contingencies that may occur during the year. Also reducing the city attorney's contract by 5%, and we have a 5% placeholder in the city council's budget. For development services, essentially, this department is taking quite a cut on their positions. They're deferring filling 3 vacant positions. Now, this may occur either partial year or full year for the 3 positions. They're transferring eligible positions to CDBG, and they're reducing 4 classifications of part-time staff hours. They're also reducing overtime, their consulting services, and other operational expenses for a total budget reduction of under $750,000. In the finance department, we're reducing staff support for financial analysis by $90,000, and we're assuming a vacancy savings of about $120,000 for a vacant senior analyst position, for a total of about $220,000. In our IT department, they've identified a general fund position of network administrator that they will defer filling for partial of the year. They're also reducing training, office supplies, some programs for total reduction of $260,000. This department, along with 2 others in 1920, has a vacancy factor of about $100,000. We are proposing to retain that vacancy factor into the 2021 budget. For our Parks and Community Services Department, contractual classes of about $100,000 are being reduced, as well as some animal contract services and other operating supplies for about $480,000. Similar to the IT department, this department also had a 1920 vacancy attrition factor of about $100,000, and we are recommending to continue this into the Parks and Community Services Department. For public services, they've essentially identified 4 full-time positions. They will be remaining vacant throughout and partial of the fiscal year. The last 2 positions, the city engineer and engineering tech, they are proposing to be vacant for only 6 months this year. They've also identified expenditures to be able to transfer into some of the other funds like Measure M and their gas tax fund. They're proposing to reduce some tree trimming, landscaping services, and other repairs and maintenance for a total of $1.7 million in cuts. For our fire department, essentially defunding 4 vacant firefighter positions. However, that reduction is being offset by an increase in ambulance medical supplies for a total budget reduction of about $470,000. In this particular department, there is a placeholder for the value of our sworn personnel of their furloughs of about $1.2 million. And another note for this particular department has a structural imbalance on their overtime to the tune of $2.5 million a year. And that's also not being addressed in this fiscal year. In our police department, they are reducing their overtimes by about $81,000. Some helicopter services and consulting costs, as well as some other conferences and operating costs for a total reduction of about $315,000. Similar to a couple of other departments in the city, this department has a 1920 budget vacancy factor of about $3.7 million, fairly high. We are recommending the continuation of that vacancy factor. And similar to the fire department, it does include the placeholder for the police warrant officers of furloughs of about $2 million. In our non-departmental categories, we've utilized the full value of CDBG and other funds to help reduce our costs for homeless shelter operations by about $800,000. That's really helped the general fund. We've eliminated promotions budget as it relates to the BIA, and we've reduced transfers as well for a total reduction of about $2.3 million. In this particular area is where we placed the 10% furlough for our miscellaneous non-safety staff of 10%. And we have also transferred the post-employment benefit program of $2.2 million from the city manager's department into non-departmental, since that technically it is a citywide program. Total reductions by department totals about $10.8 million, provides you an overview of year over year and numbers as it relates to the different departments and the percentage of the total budget as it relates to 2021 proposed general fund budget. In this category, we have outlined the defunded positions by department as identified by each specific department. As you can tell, there's quite an interesting list here of all of the departments. At the bottom of the total is almost 110 positions. 96 or so are related to part-timers. This does include the 92 part-time positions in the Parks and Community Services Department that was either furloughed or laid off. We're anticipating to continue those furloughs and layoffs up until August, mid-August, bringing that total to about 96 part-time positions. For a historical context, we wanted to show the reduction of full-time employees. This does not include our part-timers, of where we were pre the Great Recession to where we are today. We essentially eliminated 112 full-time positions, or 18% of the workforce since the Great Recession. For our other funds, our CIP total is about $14 million. We have continued the same level of, essentially the same level of funding for equipment replacement of 2.6, our self-insurance fund of 4.9. We're fully funding the IT replacement fund. We're also anticipating CDBG and home funds to the tune of about $2 million. And as mentioned last night to the City Council, our Housing Authority budget normally comes as a standalone from the proposed budget. That will be coming to the June 16th. It is in this Housing Authority section of the budget that the homeless expenses are shown. For fiscal year 2021, an all funds budget of about $161 million, 83% of which is coming from the general fund. So for our fund balances, as you may remember, back in April, when we started discussing some of our 1920 fiscal challenges as it relates to COVID, we had two different scenarios, a $10 million scenario and an $18.5 million scenario. The scenario 2 is the $18.5 million scenario where we were proposing, if that were to occur in the current year, we would be reducing the declared disasters committed fund balance category to the tune of about $7.5 million, leaving about $6.6 million by the end of this fiscal year. For our 2021 proposed budget, we are recommending to continue to use the declared disasters category, essentially eliminating that and taking the balance from economic reserves. So that would reduce our fund balance from $53.3 million to slightly under $39 million. So what has been our impacts of COVID since it started in March for us? In 1920, We're anticipating $18.5 million. We will know more of the actual expenditures closer to potentially October, November of this year, how close we were to that projection. For our 2021 proposed budget, we're anticipating about $24.1 million in losses for a total estimated impact of almost $43 million. As you can tell from the total reductions, 21.8 million is coming from departments, 14.7 from the fund balance, and we're anticipating 6.1 from the 10% staff furloughs. So for a recap, our 2021 proposed budget continues to fund over 55% of the general fund budget towards our public safety. We have fully funded the IT replacement strategic plan proposed. We are ensuring sufficient funding to maintain our street PCI of 85.8, and we're proposing a multifaceted approach to balance the general fund in 2021. So for our proposed budget calendar, we started talking to the City Council on April 21st, when we first started to show the 1920 impacts of COVID. On May 19th, shortly thereafter, we came to the council with our preliminary budget estimates. On the 26th, the CIP was proposed for the 2021 budget. Last night, the City Council saw the same PowerPoint presentation that you're viewing today. And next Tuesday, we'll be bringing back the City Council a proposal to adopt the budget with a potential additional date of June 23rd, if that's needed. And then our fiscal year will begin July 1st, 2020. And then with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol. The past meetings, we've kind of gone in alphabetical order with questions, so I'm going to reverse it. We'll go in reverse alphabetical order. And try, we want to go through it obviously, but try and be brief with some of your questions, if you would, please. Wendy, why don't you go first then?
You're muted.
Wendy?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Carol and Katrina and John for being here, and for Lorianne just to really get us through this difficult time. I don't really have any questions because I think with the direction for the departments to really scrutinize their own budgets and come up with where they can make the cuts, I trust that those are good cuts and the budget's going to be balanced. I will kind of tag along on Katrina's comments the mayor's comments last night, and regarding finding some money for the summer programs. And I did look in here where it looked like some of them were being funded, but that they're not really because of COVID. So I don't know if that's something that the staff is going to look into, but I agree that kids need to be in some kind of structured program. In the city, most of us participated when we were kids in some kind of city recreation program. And so we know how valuable that is for our community. And so thank you, Mayor Foley, for bringing this up. So I would just say, I like the fact that the IT is fully funded. That was a concern. I'm glad we're not going into the 115 trust. I think that's sacred. I think we've got a good plan. So that's all I have for right now.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. I've got Tom Pollock as number 2.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carol, for your presentation. And I sat through most of last night. I did not make the very end, so I was wondering were a couple of the questions answered. I think the one question was the police chief and his compensation. And I guess I missed the announcement. I thought he was acting police chief. I guess he's full-time police chief now. When did that happen?
The police chief, I believe, was appointed. I'd like to say sometime in February. I'd have to double check. And no, that is not his compensation. I'll be pulling that information for the council. It was a long night last night, but we're definitely on that. But that he does not make $400,000.
Fully loaded, he doesn't?
No, but we'll definitely be getting that information out.
Well, if he makes 300,000 and you got 50% for benefits, that's 450.
No, but the
Tom?
speaker,
Tom?
sorry, Mr. Taboda.
Yeah, can we stick to the budget and let Carol address that then?
Well, we answered the question. It's about
Yeah.
250 in
Yeah.
salary. The question last night was about salary, not about fully loaded.
The speaker last night was incorrect, Tom.
Okay, I didn't hear the rebuttal on that, so I missed that. And another speaker mentioned purchase of a fire truck for $500,000. Is that in the budget, I guess?
So what's in the budget is the lease of about $500,000. That's essentially a loan. So we're in the process of looking to take out a loan to help purchase the fire truck as well as some other emergency apparatus that we desperately need. And so it's the loan payment, not the actual purchase of the entire apparatus at this moment.
Okay, when was that loan taken out, I guess?
It has not been yet. We were about to start that process when COVID hit. And then COVID hit and we were redirected into other emergency issues like cost recovery and this budget. So we plan to resume that once we get a little bit more stable.
So a $500,000 purchase isn't a $500,000 purchase if you finance it.
So there would be more in the purchase.
I didn't hear Carol's response. I'm sorry. What did you say?
The fire truck was not the only item that was in that purchase. There was also the police mobile command unit that is also being recommended to be leased because of the dollar value, and a couple of other police safety fleet items were also being recommended for that. We're still in the works of working out the details of exactly what would be in that lease, and we're working with our PFM professional finance management to get an idea of what that would entail for us as far as how much we could lease and for the length of time and so forth.
I guess, I don't know. My comment as a member of the finance committee would be that we would defer that for a year until we find out exactly how deep and long and what this coronavirus impact on our revenue is going to be for sure. But that would just be my individual comment. The last thing that I had was, given a worst case scenario, last night you indicated there were some funds that we couldn't go into, like the reinsurance fund and the one other fund I think you mentioned that we shouldn't deplete. If we needed another $5 or $10 million in the next year or two, where would we go to get that?
So as you may recall, early in the process when we hit COVID and we started to realize how large these impacts were going to be, we asked departments to come to the table with a 5, 10, and 15% scenarios. We did not take the full 15% scenarios in some of the department cuts. That would be one of the areas we would be looking into and to continuing to reduce. However, we're continually monthly monitoring the situation. We're monitoring the economics. We would immediately come back to the city council if we did start seeing anywhere close to those numbers, so we can be proactive about taking some of these reductions and seeking council input on how they would like to move forward. My anticipation is not to be coming to the council with a sudden additional 10 million. It would be a dialogue continually with the council as far as how we're seeing the revenues coming in and how we're seeing the expenses as well going out to avoid that situation.
The police and fire budget is roughly what, $70 million, something like that. police and fire. It's over half our budget, right? 55%. So
55%.
so it's 60, 70 million in that range. So if did they, and you showed the numbers, but you showed them in line item and I couldn't add them up fast enough. Did police and fire reduce their budgets by 5%?
So their percentage was a little bit different, especially for the police department. We felt like we couldn't take that full 5% because that had the $3.8 million vacancy attrition that's already reducing the personnel budget. In essence, that's pretty large. But you can actually make an argument they took above and beyond because of that vacancy factor being continued into the 2021 budget. They did make some drastic other reductions in consulting and overtime and so forth, as you can see. However, they do have more items on the table if we were to have to go there to start looking into. This was, we felt, was reducing them to the point where they can continue the city services for public safety.
So everybody ponied up 5% except police and fire.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that because, as I said, the police department does have that huge vacancy attrition of 5.8, would definitely pull them over. And for the fire department, they have about $1 million to $1.5 million of overtime that was not addressed and it was not coming back into the 2021 budget. So you really need to take those numbers into account into their 2021 budget gives, so to speak. So I wouldn't say that they did not come to the table with their 5%. I feel like they did, and they've made the reductions that they felt they needed to continue their safety services.
Well, safety is important, that's for sure. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Tom. Who do I got here? Tom Arnold.
You gotta mute yourself.
I hate it when I do that. Okay. At our last meeting, several of us expressed concern about delaying the IT strategic plan. And so I'm very grateful that you heard us and that you found a way to keep that in the budget, and just overall hats off to the entire staff for just doing an amazing job with this budget. And Carol, in particular, your presentation skills are excellent. You're easy to understand the way you take something very complicated and make it something that we can understand better. So hats off to all of you, and that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Bob Junman.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. First, I just wanted to say that losing John Henson is a huge loss. John and I came on the original finance committee together. I think it was back in 2013. He's been a real good, it was a good addition then, and he's done just a great job. So sorry to see him go. Carol, I watched your presentation at the council meeting last night on TV. Great job as usual. But when we got into the questions from council members, frankly, I gave up. The sound was so bad. And let me just say to Katrina and John, you might just mention to the council members that if they don't enunciate clearly, you just can't hear them. So anyway, I just finally gave up on that conversation. I wanted to suggest that exhausting the emergency fund, I think, is a good move, since that fund has so many restrictions on it. The only time we can use it is in an emergency. So we might as well use that up, and then when we get through with this whole thing, begin to replenish it. Carol, if you could go to that chart on the estimated fund balances, it was one of the last you had there. I believe there might be an arithmetical error. Can you put that up?
Let's see which one.
No, the fund balances. Yeah, no, fund
Oh,
balance.
further down.
There you
yeah.
go.
This one?
Down in the right-hand bottom corner, I believe that number should be 38,595, should it not?
Let me take a quick look.
If you subtract 72, I mean, this 7,200 from 45,795, you get 35,595.
Yes.
You with?
Yes, you're right. I'll make
Okay.
that change.
Okay, then just one more question. I'm looking at the current year's budget book. I don't know whether you have that with you, but on page 85, it gives the 5-year rundown, and there is a line which says fixed assets. And then that is broken down on page 74 of the current budget book. But that amount is $1,345,620. And it breaks them down into categories. There's land, and there's landscaping, buildings and structures, automotive equipment, etc. But there's another line here that says other equipment, 1,332,720. That's 99% of that category. So I guess my question is that line further broken out anywhere in the budget book? I couldn't find it.
I believe it's not, but let me take a look. I'll take a closer look to the current year's adopted budget.
Okay, it's the current budget book, page 74. If there's a further breakout to other equipment, the 99% of that line, if you could send me the page number, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
But I'm just wondering what all might be in the other equipment category. Could you give me a couple of examples?
Yeah, let me get back to you on that.
Okay. And then finally on that, I'm assuming that's across all departments, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Then I guess I'm curious as to know how much of that $1,345,000 have we been able to cut? That's a pretty good sized category, and there's no mention anywhere of how much of that line we've cut out.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Okay, and let me just say thank you again, Carol, to you and all your staff. You're doing a great job. I can't find anything wrong at all with what you've done here. We're in uncharted waters, and I guess we'll all be glad to get through this, get back to normal again, whatever that turns out to be. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anna Verska.
Hi.
Hello.
All right. So first, I just wanted to thank staff and say they're really doing a great job under very, very challenging conditions. Can you guys still hear me? I'm getting a lot of interference.
I can hear you.
Okay. And then on the topic of interference, I had a very hard time really understanding anything about the public comment clip that was played. And I know that happened at a previous meeting too. So I'm not sure if everyone's having that problem or just me, because I'm calling via phone. But if other people can't hear the public comment too, that maybe we need to address that and make sure that public comment can be, addressed in a timely manner. In terms of the budget, I keep harping on this, but I think it's really important. I think COVID, yes, did bring a lot of hardship, but I think Costa Mesa was struggling with some fiscal things before COVID came, and that we were heading toward trouble anyway. The 5-year forecast, projected an average of 10 million in the hole every year for 5 years. And I know we had a lot of discussions about that. So for me, it's about moving forward the best we can, but also addressing those things and those behaviors and those spending patterns and other things that brought us to that point of, we were going to be in trouble anyway. And also, I've heard a lot of people say it's only the end of the beginning. We don't know exactly what the new normal will look like. Our city manager was very eloquent at last night's meeting, and really moved me, her comment at the end, which said, we have to do more with less. We don't know even what that is going to look like. We don't even know if this is the worst of it or if there's more hard times ahead. And, to be cognizant of all those things, because this might just be the beginning, really, and the end of the beginning. More specifically, I'm really still unhappy about completely abolishing the marijuana tax. I think that's one way where, it's an example of how if you don't take care of the pennies, you won't be taking care of the dollars. I understood why maybe bringing it down to several percent for the time being was a good idea to give the businesses a break, but completely doing away with it, I thought was short-sighted. And in fact, marijuana sales are now doing fantastic, and it could have brought some extra revenue to our city. And lastly, I want to bring up the aides and chief of staff. I've really fought against this and criticized it from the beginning when it was proposed. I think it's unnecessary in the size that our city is. I think it puts an additional barrier between residents and their local leaders. And this is basically the most local access to our government and interacting. I think it's a nice to have, but not a need to have. And I think it's quite outrageous that hasn't been cut out of the budget and the circumstances that we found ourselves in. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Anna. We got Al Malone.
Hi.
Big
Can you
Al.
hear me? Can you hear
Big
me?
Al. Oh, yes.
Good. Okay. I don't have any questions. I got some general comments. Someone once said that the purpose of government is to provide services that we citizens cannot provide for ourselves. While public safety is at the very top of the list, there are other services we need to rely on. And that's where I have a big problem with this budget. I'm sorry, I'm not on board with most of you. Staff appears to have done a very good job with the budget process, subject to the constraints staff has no control over. Until these constraints are readjusted, we will fail to meet all of the needs of the general public. And it appears that even maintenance issues will be a challenge for years to come. If you have a pothole in the street in front of your house, it's likely the problem will be satisfactorily resolved. Before the pandemic, they would have repaired the entire block, if not the entire section. And the condition of our streets is but the tip of the iceberg. The thing that really bothers me is the public works projects, the capital improvements. To me, unless I'm wrong here, that's essentially dead in the water. It's subject to the vagaries of securing grants. And who knows if grants are going to be available in the future, given all the needs that society has. And you think all these other cities are going to sit around watching Costa Mesa glom onto the grant money, whatever is available? The thing that really bothers me is I don't see a path to rescuing the public works projects. We got pages and pages, millions and millions of dollars of projects that we're never going to be able to fund, okay? To me, it's become a wish list, okay? You got like a $9 million project for Fire Station 2. I'm not an expert in that area, but I have a feeling that Tom Arnold can speak to the matter and make a strong case for it, okay? Where are we going to come up with that $9 million 2, 3, 4 years down the road? Our revenues cannot meet the expenses we have right now, and that situation was before the pandemic began. And while South Coast Plaza can be expected to make a grand recovery over time, the change in consumer buying preferences may make a 100% recovery almost impossible. Amazon has benefited from the pandemic at the expense of brick and mortar, and South Coast Plaza is essentially brick and mortar. I strongly suggest a bond issue to rescue some of these wish list items, whether it be the fire station, whether it's, I don't like this lease that you're going to do for this $500,000 of police equipment. That could have been included in a bond issue spread out over 20 years. Okay. So to me, I think now staff has done a great job. I have no criticism of that. I don't know how they were able to do what they did. Okay. Given those constraints, but you need to address those constraints because time is going to be running out. We're going to be in a crisis mode year after year after year. How do we get out of this crisis mode? We need some systemic changes, and reducing the head count is not going to do the job. Reducing the head count reduces services. Now, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to make a motion or another member make one, that might be in order. Otherwise, I stand ready to make a motion that will beg for a second so we can discuss as needed and perhaps entertain a substitute motion that we can vote on. It used to be, we used to make motions like the council does. They always, every issue, they make a motion. Sometimes there's a substitute motion. Eventually, they always come to a resolution and they take a vote. We haven't done that in months. Mr. Chair, what do you say to that? May I make a motion? Do you have a make a motion? Let's put ourselves on the line here. I turn it over to Ralph. Do I have your permission to make a motion?
Yeah, you're right, Al. We have not, since we've been Zooming here, we have not had motions per se or recommendations go to the council. So I regret that we are Zooming versus at meeting, but even though we're Zooming, you're free to make a motion, certainly.
Here it is. It's very short and to the point. And I'm saying that FiPAC does not support the proposed 2021 budget on the grounds that it fails to meet the needs of the public at large, period. I'll repeat it. FiPAC does not support the proposed 2021 budget, comma, on the grounds that it fails to meet the needs of the public at large. That's my motion. Anna, Tom, would you care to second it so we can get into it deeper?
Sure, I'll go ahead and second it so we can have a discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
I got my hand up.
Wendy.
Clarification, Mr. Malone. I'm looking at the capital improvement program, and it's in the back of the budget, and it does call out 125,000 to begin the Fire Station 3 repairs. So I don't agree with your statement that we are neglecting street repairs, alleys. Raja and his staff have there's a lot of details in the number of projects, traffic signals. I think there's like 31. So I think it's a way back, it's a scaled back program. But I don't think that we're going to, we will still repair the potholes according to this plan, not according to my theory. It's part of the budget.
You're looking at this 2021 budget. I'm looking at the future. The fire station is going to need a lot more than 125,000. I'm asking you, where's the money going to come in the future?
Well, we don't know.
The future is not 15 years away like it was before the pandemic. The future has been moved forward on us against our wishes. Okay, we just took a $30 million hit.
Well, we can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think this is a very prudent trimming away of the fat to make us lean again. you know, we were lean 10 years ago and now we've grown fat again. And so it's not perfect, but I think it's up to the council to continue to scrutinize it. But I'm certainly ready to move forward. There's 2 other meetings. I wrote down the dates here, 16th and the 23rd. So we will still have the opportunity to make public comments on any areas that we are still concerned with. But I disagree with you. I disagree with the motion.
Okay,
I
anybody
see,
else?
if you look, Wendy, just one more point. If you look at that schedule, it goes for 5 pages. You're looking at like $22 million a year in years going forward, okay? And we can't even meet our expenses on an ongoing basis. And I'm concerned with that. I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to we're not going to serve the general public. There's a lot of things other than fire and police that we need to take care of. And I just don't see where the money's going to come from. That's my problem. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
Bob wants to talk. Unmute
Bob was
yourself,
trying to
Bob.
speak. You have to unmute yourself.
Bob, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sure.
Al, the problem is there's a money shortage in the land. And I think our current focus should be getting through this thing, filling the potholes, doing the maintenance. So let's not neglect the maintenance on what we've got. But I do think that we can defer some of these capital projects. I share your concern that in the future, where are we going to get the money to do these things? But that's a revenue problem, I believe. So how do we increase the revenue of this fair city? That's not easy, but I think that's a separate thing. So I love you like a brother, but I do not agree with your motion. Sorry, pal.
Okay. I will not support the motion either. I think there's too many, similar to what I guess has been said, but there's just too many unknowns. We have a quote balanced budgets now going into 2021 that uses $7 million of reserves or $7.5 million of reserves. There are still a lot of unknowns out there. The furloughs aren't even final. We don't know if the labor associations will agree with that. There's a lot of unknowns, as I'm sure Carol will say, to the revenue estimates. There's just so much still up in the air. How soon will the economy come back? I don't think it would be prudent for the city now to enter into borrow a $30 million bond or something with so many unknowns out there.
Is there a substitute motion?
May I speak?
Tom Arnold?
I'm not even sure on our agenda that we're being asked to, support or not support this. It seemed informational to me, but maybe somebody can help me with that. Are we required to have a motion to support this budget?
We have in the past. I mean, in the past, prior years, the agenda item has been listed, and then it doesn't specifically say FiPAC vote to recommend or not recommend. But we've taken that action to, like I said, either recommend or not recommend, or submit a list of recommendations to council, based on FiPAC committee meeting discussions. And then typically the committee would vote to approve those recommendations that would go forward to council.
Okay, fine. I would say Al has some very valid issues, but I can't agree that this is the way to deal with them. But I would encourage this group to take his concerns, well, really all of our concerns, seriously, and do a deep dive, going forward. But I just don't see how not approving this budget is going to advance that concern.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's. If there's no more discussion, let's take a vote on Al's motion. We had Al made the motion. Tom Pollock seconded it. All those, I guess we're do a voice vote. It goes same order. Wendy Leese,
No.
Tom Pollock,
Yes.
Tom Arnold,
No.
Bob Juneman,
Nay.
Anna. Al Malone.
Yes.
Yes. Who said yes? Was that Anna?
Anna.
Yeah, Anna, I'm saying yes.
Who said yes?
Anna said yes. Yes. I'm saying yes.
Okay. Al Malone,
Yes.
Ralph Taboda, no. Angie, I wasn't keeping track.
4-3.
I got it.
I'm sorry.
I've got it. Thank you.
What was the vote?
4 no, 3 yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
Motion. Okay. Thank you, Al. Motion does not pass though.
Okay.
Okay. Let me ask a few. First of all, again, thank you, Carol and staff. I know Jennifer's on the line too. Thank you, Jennifer King, for the good budget presentation and putting it together. It was, I'm sure, a challenge. Also, similar comments that were made. I'm glad that and hopefully FiPAC had something to do with some of the member comments that the staff changed their mind on is now utilizing all of the declared disaster reserve versus initially there was a thinking of using some of the 115 trust reserve that got changed, and also the deferral of the IT strategic plan got changed. So I think all those were positive. I want to pick up on two items that came up last night at the council meeting, and on the one of the first charts, Carol, it says general fund overview. And the first line says no increases in citywide headcount are included in the budget. And my concern is that I read that, I'm thinking there's no increases in headcount between the end of this year, 1920, and the end of 2021. Now, do you want to comment on that? Is there increases when June 30th rolls around, the city will have a certain head count. There will be actual head count, number of FTEs on the payroll.
Correct.
Is there money in the budget to, I guess, fund additional FTEs next year?
So the actual full-time employee count did not increase since
I understand the 499 number, right?
Correct. So,
Okay.
However, there have been positions that city departments have identified to defund. So even though the actual head count of the number of positions stays at 499, there have been positions that are included in that 499 that have been earmarked to be defunded either partially or full fiscal year 2021 to help offset the deficit, so to speak. And those were presented among two different slides.
Right. Okay, understand that. Let me ask it a different way. And sorry, committee, if I seem to, but I think this is important for us in particular, the mayor and mayor pro tem, because they're voting on this budget. Finance has 7 vacancies currently. If you look at the last vacancy report at the end of May, May 23rd, it showed finance with 7 vacancies. In the charts you showed, you're defunding one of those positions to help balance the budget.
Correct.
That would tell me that 6 of those positions are still funded in next year's budget.
That's correct.
Okay, so if you do that for every department, IT, public services, police, fire, whoever else, there's funding for additional employees to be hired next year.
Correct.
Such as the 6 people in finance. And that's so there's not a hiring freeze.
Well, there is a soft, I'd like to say soft hiring freeze. So for a department to hire right now, they would have to provide documentation to support that that position is essential.
Okay,
So
that's fair.
So there are positions throughout the city that are considered essential to maintain city services that are currently funded. So we left it to the departments to identify those positions to keep funded and which positions they would feel could be defunded to help offset the deficit that we are anticipating or estimating for next year.
Does that include public safety?
So I want to remind you, for public safety, for the fire department, they are defunding 4 firefighter positions in the 2021 budget. The police department has a vacancy attrition already built in from the 1920 adopted budget to the tune of about $3.7 million. So they also have earmarked some vacancy savings that they need to adhere to during the 2021 fiscal year.
Okay, I know you identified in the budget 13.75 FTEs that were defunded.
Correct.
You, do you know, could you estimate how many positions are funded in next year's budget? Granted, they have to get approval from the city manager, because that's the number I think council should know, saying, okay, there's budget in here, there's budget in the budget to hire X number of staff.
So if you take that 1375 against the 499, it would give you about 485.
Right. And you've got some people in police. I know you haven't identified the number of heads, but that 3.6 million equates to a number of heads.
Correct. So let me kind of explain the police department vacancy attrition. It would equate to, yes, approximately around 20 FTEs, depending on, you know, how they're compensated right now, currently.
Right.
For the police department, though, when a police officer, any kind of sworn position, leaves the city with the retire, there is a pretty extensive hiring process that takes months, sometimes most of the time, months to onboard somebody, with, you know, through the background check, academy, the training that they have to go through before they come on board. There's a pretty extensive process. In that time frame, the city is realizing savings for that position that has not yet been filled because of the prior individual who left that position vacant. So that is a natural vacancy that occurs in the police department as there's turnover in the police department that occurs. So I'd be cautious with that putting an actual FTE, but because of that natural occurrence of hiring an actual sworn police individual.
All right, no, and I appreciate what you're saying. I'm just saying if all the stars aligned, and the city was able to hire new people next year, what I heard you just say, if you take the 499 less the 14, let's say 1375, 14, you said there's approximately 20 people in and I know you're going to be mad at me for putting words in your mouth, but if that's what do we say, 485. If there's 20 people in police, that's 465. So what I hear you saying is, give or take, there's approximately 465 FTEs funded in this budget. Is that fair to say?
I would be cautious with that because of the vacancy attrition that's already built in.
Okay.
Just because there is nuances related to that. And the police department is not the only department with that vacancy attrition that occurred in 1920. Parks and IT also have vacancy attritions that transferred in.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I'm not trying to, I put you on the spot, I suppose, but that's not my intent. My intent is to I want to make sure that council members here, the mayor and pro tem, recognize that there could, and I understand it. If I was working for the city, I'd want to hire more people too, because I know you're very short-handed. Certainly the finance department, you need those 6 people or 7 people. I understand that, but I just wanted to make sure that the council members here understand that. So thank you. And again, I'm not trying to call you out or anything. I just wanted to make sure understood. The other thing that concerns me and something is it came up last night, is the overtime. Fire was talked about last night at the council meeting. And in fact, Chief Stefano had a chart going back 7 or 8 years of actual overtime performance. You made the comment in your presentation that the structural deficit in OT in fire is not addressed in this budget, which tells me that there's a very good chance that the actual OT, fire could overrun their OT budget sometime during next year. And certainly that poses a risk to the budget because, if that does overrun, which they've overrun 10 out of the last 11 years, where's that money coming from? And police wasn't talked about last night, though. Police has consistently overrun their budget, and I understand why. They were shorthanded and all that. I understand all that. My concern is that the budget for OT, for fire and police, is understated in this current budget, and very likely mid-year, it's gonna surface. You'll be very aware that those budgets will be overrun, and then that's going to put pressure on the budget. Where does that funding come from? In December 2019, 6 months ago, when we had the mid-year review, police had spent their annual OT budget in the first 6 months. Their budget is not changing this year from last year. So quite frankly, I fully expect police to overrun their OT budget next year. So I'm just concerned if and when that happens, somebody's going to be scrambling for more money because those budgets have overrun, and there ain't a whole lot of money to find. So I'll get off my soapbox. Okay, with that, again, thank you, Carol, very much, and the staff. I know this. I got a copy of the budget book, and it's complete, just like pre-COVID days. And you guys did a hell of a lot of work in a short amount of time to put all this together. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, Okay, so what would, I guess I'll solicit, oh, again, I apologize. Madam Mayor, do you have any comments?
Thank you so much. And thank you for recognizing the hard work that Ms. Molina and Ms. Farrell Harrison are doing, and their entire team. Yes, indeed, it is difficult to put a budget together under normal circumstances. It's even made more difficult to put a budget together when you have such archaic technology that you, in this case, as I understand, they're putting things together and the technology crashed 4 times while they were trying to pull it together. But on top of all that, they actually had to put 2 budgets together. So it is, sorry, I lost some battery. So it is very difficult, and we do appreciate them, and I'm glad that the committee does as well. I wanted to just address a couple of the comments, and I know I raised the overtime issue at Mr. Tabota's suggestion. One thing that we will have that we don't know what it looks like now is that there'll be some overtime that's reimbursed to us, that's CARES Act, and that is COVID related. And so a lot of the overtime over the last several months is going to hopefully get reimbursed to us. One thing that I forgot to ask last night that I hope that Ms. Molina can maybe look into, we declared some sort of a state of emergency as it related to the protests and in order to enact the curfew. Is there any opportunity for any reimbursement from the state or from the feds as it relates to that emergency response?
At this point in time, I'm not aware of any opportunity. However, we are looking into that a possibility.
Okay, great. So as it relates to the COVID related, we'll get reimbursed. And then, and yes, Mr. Tabota, I do think we understand the number of positions. It's an understatement to say that our staff right now is doing more with less, and that it's a challenge to get the work done. We have 7 council members now, and that's at least 6 people who are very active and who have a lot of requests from the staff. We have, new council members who have new ideas and want to make their mark in the city and want to do what they said they would do in their districts. And so there's a tension there between the ability to get that work done, the ability to have enough staff to provide those services versus the desire for doing those tasks. And we're working through that. I think many of you heard my comments last night, and I'm sure Mayor Pro Tem is going to speak as well, and he had similar comments, but we really do feel it's important for the next 6 months at a minimum that we allow our team to move back into City Hall, get prepared for all the new normal that is going to be required as it relates to social distancing, physical distancing, all of the disinfecting and the temperature taking and whatever is required for us to be at City Hall and open to the public. That actually takes a lot of time, more time than you would think. We have to draft policies, we have to draft protocols, all of those have to get shared with our staff, and our team has to get trained, and then implementation. So we're going to take the next couple of months to do that work. And then in August, everyone's going to get a break. And so we're going to ask respectfully that you allow them that time to take a vacation. I know our city manager's son is going off to college, and it's important milestone in life. Many of us have been there. And it's important that we allow our team to kind of recoup and recover from the last several months of working non-stop every single day, every weekend, around the clock. And I mean, I just ask that you give them that. I've promised to do that, and I'm one of those people that's always demanding that we do more. So we also want to just get our budget stabilized, prioritize working with our small businesses and with our business community to reopen safely and make sure that it's a safe customer experience so that people will want to go to our shops and salons and our restaurants, etc. And so that takes also some time with planning. Planning staff has a lot on their plate to be able to help businesses get to be able to open. And so in September, I think we'll be ready to, I don't know that it's going to be back to normal, but we'll at least be ready to be back to something more than what we have going on now. Many people are working from home right now. I think if you didn't know it, you wouldn't know it because of so much work that's being produced during this time period. But many people, and Carol, I mean, Ms. Molina, you could probably tell me how many, but as I understand it, it's over 100 people that are working from home. And as somebody who's been working from home myself during this time, it's hard. It's hard to work from home. I can't wait to go back to work, back to the office, because, you know, all these calls take a lot longer than just, you know, getting out and talking to someone in person. And also, you know, the challenge of my husband just walked in, I'm in the kitchen, it's dinner time, everyone has to be quiet. All of our employees are under those same circumstances. Some of them have kids at home because school is doing, you know, they're doing the learning by technology. And so it's a challenge to get the work done that we expect. So I am live. So yeah, if you could help us with that, we really appreciate it. And we will do our best to do everything we can to, you know, get through this period. I agree that we have a revenue issue. We need to diversify our revenue stream. We've been talking about that for years, but we haven't done it. We have a ballot initiative that the council is bringing forward, and that ballot initiative is intended to generate some different kind of revenue for us with regard to the cannabis. And we will be, I know there's a lot of discussion about the tax. Ms. Verska pointed out the reduction in the tax. I agree with her. And I suspect what you're going to see at the council meeting where we vote on the initiative is a variety of tax options to address the retail and home delivery for cannabis. So we're going to address the tax issue there. And yes, cannabis has been considered an essential service, much like Home Depot. Both of them are generating lots of revenue right now. And unfortunately in Costa Mesa, we're not benefiting from that. But we are benefiting from Home Depot. I spoke with the manager this week, and that store the revenue is higher than they've been in years, he said, during these last few months. So we've got some industries that will help us. And so we're looking forward to that. South Coast Plaza does open tomorrow. Disneyland opens on July 9th in a kind of a cautious way. That actually helps Costa Mesa because we have many people who stay in our hotels here in Costa Mesa and go to Disneyland, go to the plaza. So Disneyland opening helps. We just have to hope that we don't see a spike and everything gets shut down again. So we'll keep watching those numbers, encourage everyone to shop local, encourage people to go to our local stores, grocery stores, shops. Don't buy on Amazon. When you buy on Amazon, which everyone does, you know, people in my house as well, but when you buy on Amazon, basically we don't get those sales tax dollars. And I would love for us to do a PSA on that, maybe Ms. Molina, that we kind of explain to people why when they shop on Amazon and they pay the sales tax, it does not come back into their local community. We don't have to name Amazon, but you know what I mean. But that's going to be our push, shop local. We're going to be really pushing that over the next several months. So thank you all for your service. Thanks for your input. We value it. Even if we don't always agree with it, we still value it. You know, difference of opinion actually helps to move, I think, a better product forward. So thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Stevens, do you have a fan tonight or today, John?
No fan. I'm sweating it out. That's all right. You guys are worth it. Yeah, so Katrina hit on a lot of the points that I was going to talk about. It is a time, like I said last night, where we have to get back to the basics. I actually think that, you know, in the long run, it might be good because, and it sounds as strange as it sounds, when we get back to the basic kind of services, and now, you know, we're even going to be looking at some of the what we consider the basic services and whether we're doing those efficiently or whether we can improve. That's no doubt going to be coming up. And then we get there and then we kind of build from there. You know, it kind of reminds me of, like, you know, if you guys have ever been to Peters Canyon after a fire and it's all scorched, but then you come back to Peters Canyon 6 months later and it's more beautiful than it was before the fire. So I think that there's some of that that's going on here, and an opportunity to rebuild in a different way and in a better way. And we've seen some of these things happen. You know, just last week, we it's temporary, but we put in place this ordinance where restaurants can open more of their open, you know, outdoor spaces. And the purpose of that is to get them more square footage and therefore greater volume. And then, you know, of course, greater taxes, but we're concerned about them staying in business. You know, we put in the eviction moratorium way back when. You may remember that. Well, the reason we did that, and that was controversial with some, particularly landlords, but the reason we did that is so these businesses could survive. If we didn't do that, there would be a lot of businesses who would not be in a position to reopen because they would have been evicted during these 3 months. So we've made some decisions along the way to put us in this position. We're going to keep going forward. As the mayor said, we do have the cannabis item that's going to come on our agenda, probably the first meeting in July, and that will go to the voters most likely. We don't know what the council's going to do with that, but that's going to be an opportunity for additional revenue. But there's also development that's going on in Costa Mesa. The press is moving forward, and there's going to be 60,000 new square feet of restaurant and retail in that area. Tom and Ralph in particular, you'll be happy to know that on Friday, I believe the breweries and the bars are going to be open. So we can go back. We may even be able to discuss, this budget, this actual budget at our old bar where we used to go to discuss this stuff. So things are coming back, and they're going to come back in a different way. And we're in a position to really improve the city and do some things that we otherwise wouldn't have done, because necessity is the mother of invention. And we are certainly in a position of necessity. And it's good to hear these things. I even though it was on the losing end of the vote, I appreciate Al's perspective, and I agree with it. I don't think I've ever voted against an infrastructure project, and it is very important. And that's the reason, not only with me, but with our prior councils that preceded me, we've been able to develop this, it's an index, it's called the pavement index. I don't know, CPI or something like that, where it's 85 and it's #2 in the whole county. So we've been assured by Raja that we're going to maintain that, even though we scale back some of our spending in the next fiscal year. And then we'll continue to look at that. But your point is really well taken. And so we listen to all these points and do the best we can. And there's a lot of room for improvement and growth. And it's hopefully there'll be a silver lining that comes out of this, and Costa Mesa will be better than it has ever been as a result of the decisions we're making now and with your input. So I appreciate all the hard work. Thanks for listening last night. That was kind of a long, tedious meeting at times, and I appreciate that you guys listened. And of course, as the mayor said, and so many have said, Carol has done a miraculous job. I'll tell you one little thing that was telling for me when I just want to leave you with this. When Carol was talking yesterday, and Councilmember Mansour asked her a question at the very beginning about the contingency fund. Well, I knew the answer to that because this is my 4th budget cycle and I've been through this budget cycle before and I've lived it. Carol hasn't lived it. She knew the answer and she said it almost word to word what I would have said if I would have answered that question. The only way that she could have gotten that knowledge is just good old fashioned hitting the books and working hard to understand the history. So it is a spectacular job she's done. Excuse me, and her team. And I'm glad we hired Lori Ann. I don't know where we'd be without him, but we're gonna get through this. It's gonna be great.
All right, thank you, John. To the mayor's point, I was in Home Depot several times last week, and it was hopping, very busy. And I was in IKEA I guess I shouldn't admit this, maybe, but I was in IKEA this morning. So now I got to put it together. I just want to make I just wanted to reiterate on this, and pardon me for repeating it, I guess, on the FTEs. I am not against, or I am not anti-hiring additional people. In fact, even with the financial situation the city is in, I understand fully why the city needs to hire more people, and I quite frankly, I'm supportive of that. My concern was the transparency is in particular, especially for the council members who will be voting on this budget. I wanted to make sure, as best I could, help them understand that situation. So I wasn't against adding staff. And again, thank you, Carol, and team. I'm gonna make a motion that because we won't have another meeting before the additional reviews with let's see, council, because you'll be voting on the capital pack, because capital wasn't reviewed last night. I know you had reviewed it previously. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve this budget?
I will.
Second it.
Okay, Tom Arnold and Wendy Lee seconds.
I just want to make a comment. And you kind of touched on it a few minutes ago, Ralph, but in the past few years, we have, and to your credit, Ralph, we have written a letter and edited and presented it to the council. Sometimes it was too late, but I think 2 things stand out. One, we are not, we're not writing a letter, but this council has enabled us, and I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem to be here, to get, and it's in the something that I read in the budget, to really give us as the FiPAC committee, I said that twice, the opportunity on the front end, not to wait until, July 23rd when you're voting on it, to listen to our concerns. We don't have all those concerns. So as far as process is concerned, we've come a long way to be able to give our input to the council for them to consider in a timely manner. So I appreciate those changes that have come about. But anyway, I'll second the motion.
Okay. I appreciate that, Wendy. Actually back in, I don't know if it was late March or early April, Carol and Lori Ann reached out to the budget subcommittee, and we had, I think it was 2 phone meetings on the current year's budget and the impact of COVID. And so they reached out immediately, I think, to FiPAC, and I think Carol's been very accommodating and conscious of our schedule vis-a-vis the council schedule, so that we could weigh in on the budget prior to council meetings. Kelly was very accommodating, and Carol has continued that accommodation. So appreciate it. Any other comments on the motion? No, okay, I'll take a voice vote here. Wendy,
Yes. Aye.
Tom Pollock,
No.
Tom Arnold,
Aye.
Robert Juneman,
Yes.
Al Malone,
No.
Anna
Aye.
Verska, sorry,
No.
Yes. No.
okay. Okay,
No.
let me go back. Al Malone,
No.
Anna Verska. Anna Verska, you,
Is she on mute?
Anna, did you vote?
No.
Okay,
No.
okay.
I
That's me.
vote no.
Okay, all right, got it. And that's me, Ralph. I vote yes. Angie, you're gonna have to be the scorekeeper again.
4 yes, 3 no.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, the motion passes then. Okay, any other comments? Otherwise, we will adjourn. No, okay, I got 5:48.
So move.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
thank you, Carol, again. Thank you, Mayor Pro
Good
Tem
night,
and Mayor, for
everyone.
attending. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Thumbs up.
Yep.